the late 50s, Alfred Hitchcock was probably the most recognizable director in the world. His name alone was enough to get audiences in the theater. In 1960, Alfred Hitchcock's career hit its highest point with the release of Psycho. It was followed by The Birds in 1963 and Marnie in 1964. Although today considered a classic, Marnie was a box office and critical failure. Marnie also marked the end of the collaborations between Hitchcock and two of his colleagues. Both his director of photography, Robert Burks, and his editor, George Tomasini, passed away as Hitchcock was preparing his 50th film. Sadly, Marnie would also be the last Hitchcock film featuring a score by Bernard Herrmann. In the mid-60s, the master of suspense was competing not only with himself, but with a whole new generation of filmmakers. Everyone was now imitating him. Everyone aspired to be the next Hitchcock. But to the critics, his films were becoming old-fashioned. And when Torn Curtain was released in 1966, they called it ordinary and sluggish. One reviewer wrote, "When was Hitchcock last at the movies? Has he lost his touch? Was the director who had been ahead of his time now behind his time?" Curiously, despite the bad notices, the film was successful at the box office. Looking at it today, while the film is not in the same league as North by Northwest or The Man Who Knew Too Much, Torn Curtain is full of great ideas and full of life. In fact, several of the sequences stand out as pure and genuine Hitchcock moments. Alfred Hitchcock once said, "I want to be remembered as a man who entertained millions through the technique of film." Despite the rumors, with Torn Curtain, Mr. Hitchcock, you did not fail. Hitchcock got the idea for Torn Curtain when he heard of the true story of two British diplomats, Guy Burgess, and what a dirty business it is.
You told me nothing. You know nothing.
Novelist Brian Moore was hired to write the script. Later on, British writers Keith Waterhouse and Willis Hall did a dialogue polish. However, an arbitration with the Writers Guild determined that their contribution did not justify screen credit. The script was a problem, and Hitchcock was not satisfied with it. For one thing, it seemed to lack humor, an essential ingredient to all of the master's thrillers. At one point, the script was sent for comments to the famous Italian writing team of Agee and Scarpelli, who were developing a project with Hitchcock at the time. "Construction is excellent," they wrote to Hitchcock, "and should not be changed at all. But the dialogue needs to be revised. It is flat and has no sparkle." In the meantime, Julie Andrews and Paul Newman had been cast in the leading roles. Julie Andrews only had a small window during which she could make the film, and Hitchcock had to rush into production before he was completely satisfied with the script. Shooting began in the fall of 1965. At the time of Torn Curtain, Paul Newman was already an established actor and an international star. Julie Andrews had received an Oscar for Mary Poppins and was fresh out of the hit musical The Sound of Music. But Hitchcock had mixed feelings about his female star and said he had been talked into hiring her because she was so hot at the time. The frustrated director said, "Then everybody sat around waiting for her to sing." Like Hitchcock himself, Newman was unsure about the script. Newman was of a new generation and had been trained at the Actors Studio. It wasn't in his nature not to speak up. Newman let Hitchcock know of his problems with the script in a letter detailing 14 specific points, some of them having to do with the tone of the film, some with specific scenes, some with credibility, and others with a characterization of his role. In his note, the actor also objects to the title. To him, it lacks the mystery which titles like North by Northwest and Notorious had. Looking back at his experience on Torn Curtain, Paul Newman declared, "I think I could have hit it off with Hitchcock if the script had been better. It was not a lack of communication or a lack of respect. The only thing that constantly stood in our way was the script. Of the 19th century, the judge at the Old Bailey always carried a nosegay, which he occasionally sniffed to alleviate the odors of evil from the Newgate jail next door. When you come onto the Hitchcock set, have a good, deep sniff. Love Hitch. Years later, Hitchcock said that Newman was an actor who liked doing things his own particular way, and he was fine with that. On the other hand, he resented performers who tried to get in the way of his camera and compromise the editing of a scene. Hitchcock respected actors as long as they respected him. Early in his American movie career, Hitchcock liked to make a statement with interesting openings. In Saboteur, for instance, the credit sequence immediately tells us something about the story. The couple's dancing to a waltz in the opening in Shadow of a Doubt is a recurring image and theme in the plot. But the most impressive openings, perhaps, remain those designed by creative genius Saul Bass. From the opening credits of Torn Curtain, the film was shot on sound stages at Universal Studios in Hollywood, with some of the exteriors on location. In preparation for the film, Hitchcock apparently went on the same journey as the two main characters in the story. He flew to Copenhagen, then via Romanian airline went to East Berlin, Leipzig, East Berlin again, and finally Sweden. During pre-production, Hitchcock also recorded sounds in East Germany to get a flavor of the atmosphere. Hitchcock had originally intended to set the film in Poland, but was convinced otherwise by a leading Polish producer who was in America at the time. Hitchcock met with him as part of his research, and the man immediately suggested East Germany rather than Poland for the film. Continued, most films seem to make the communists rather granite-faced individuals and humorless. By making the enemy practically likable, the director was purposely going against conventions and cliches.
Sir, is it true you're defecting because
Professor,
Washington...
is that the anti-missile
Does that mean that your plan is to hand over your secret work to a communist country?
At the press conference, Hitchcock puts the audience in Sarah's position. She never quite sees Michael in the clear. Having both of them in the shot would have been objective, Hitchcock explained, rather like a play. Film, he said, is subjective.
How could you do it? How could you tell those lies?
Well, I thought it would be better if you didn't know about this.
Interestingly enough, Hitchcock decides to film the confrontation between Michael and Sarah like a staged play. The camera is not moving, and both actors are present at opposite ends of the room. Rather than experiencing it, the audience is now witnessing the action. As a result, we are uncomfortable. We feel like voyeurs. And that is exactly what Hitchcock intended when he put us in that position. Good stories are structured in 3 acts, and Torn Curtain is no exception. In the second act, we completely change point of view. We have left Sarah's for Michael's. Hitchcock hated to waste money, and he resisted building an entire set for the hotel lobby. He decided instead, comparing the 2 scores, there is no doubt that Herman's music, as it had been consistently in the past, would have been a nice complement to Hitchcock's visuals. One can only imagine how different the film would have been with Herman's music. After the murder, in the original script, an interesting sequence took place. Michael and Sarah stop at one of the country's best restaurants, a worker's canteen. The manager of the factory explains how he admires Michael for defecting from his country. The workers expect a speech. Michael resists, and Sarah says a few words, thanking the men for their kind welcome. Suddenly, Michael's face is drained. Standing in front of him is Gromek's older brother. The same actor played the part, wearing a mustache, a wig, and glasses. Hitchcock added some twisted irony. The brother, holding a knife similar to the one used on Gromek earlier, cuts a piece of sausage and asks Michael to give it to his sibling. The scene ultimately ended on the cutting room floor when Hitchcock decided to shorten the film, but there was also another concern. At one point, the brother shows family pictures, and we find out that Gromek has 3 children. Ultimately, the character of Gromek began to look too sympathetic, and logically, Newman was turning into the villain. All that's left of the sequence are a few stills and pages from the script. Hitchcock never felt like he had to top himself. However, his audience and the critics did. The immediate reaction to Torn Curtain was that it was no North by Northwest. But as Hitchcock once stated, most films should be seen more than once. And on second viewing, Torn Curtain emerges as a perfectly legitimate Hitchcock picture. Hitchcock felt satisfied if he got 75% of his original vision on the screen. With Torn Curtain, he most certainly accomplished his ambition.